Alright. The Red Strings Club. A game I've heard a lot about but I actually never played. It was recommended to me by a reviewer this time around, and I was like, alright, we need to give it a go. And I have given it a go. And my god, I think it is really good in almost every way a game needs to be. Not only is it pretty, but it also has a great story. It has some honestly really interesting bartending mechanics, as this is sort of a bartender simulator, and an extremely interesting world. I couldn't be happier to say I've played it, and we'll be talking a little bit about it today, so strap yourselves in, get ready for that, and let's just get right into it. Now, what is the Red Strings Club? The Red Strings Club is a game where you take over the mantle of a bartender in a cyberpunk futuristic big tech city. And that's about as simple as I get. Everybody has some form of cybernetic enhancements except you. There's an entire mystery revolving around that in the game, which I don't want to spoil, as I'll be completely honest and say without the story, this game wouldn't have a lot for me. So I don't think it's a good idea to spoil the entire thing for you. I will, however, discuss its themes and talk about them. However, I will not go into any direct story spoilers, simply because a lot of the reason you'll be playing this game and the Red Strings Club in general is just to experience that story, and honestly, ruining that for you would probably be the biggest crime I could commit talking about this game. Alright, if we just dig in immediately with the visuals, because I know that's what a lot of people notice, it's a pretty game. It's a pretty gorgeous pixel art style that you nowadays sees quite a bit actually. It sees a lot of use. However, it is almost always done in a unique way, and I am happy to say the Red String Club is no different. It has this really cozy vibe to it most of the time, especially when you're in the bar, and it sort of changes when you end up at some point in the story in another place that I can't say for spoiler reasons, as if I do it would be extremely obvious. But when you end up there, it completely changes the vibe, the color changes, and so on. And so does the soundtrack, because one of the things that I continually was impressed by within the Red Strings Club was the game's sound design. Because a lot of games manage to do sound design in a way where it exists, it's there. There's some background music and whatnot. It isn't like the most important part of the game. Very much like Coffee Talks, the Red String Club is a game I could take out where I could just look at the music alone and fall in love with it. It has this very chill vibe going on almost at all times, and honestly it is extremely calming. It is some of the music I'm listening to right now as I'm recording this. I'm listening to the Red Strings Club soundtrack because the game has a very big vibe, and that's like the only word to really describe it, right? Like, it has the feel that some games just doesn't have. It makes you relaxed while also being an information broker in your bar and trying to, get information out of corporates and other corporate people. And that's really interesting. Like, it's something I've never seen being done before. And while it's hard to discuss the plot in as loose terms as I am right now, because honestly, again, a lot of the game is the plot. The plot is extremely good. At one point, you get this robot into your bar that helps you identify people, and it quizzes you after every interaction you have had. And honestly, it hits different. It's good. It's really good. Oh my god, I want to talk about the story because the story is so good. But I'll restrain myself. When the gameplay itself is fairly rudimentary, when it comes to that, because as you see, it's only being controlled by the mouse, and you essentially just mix and match drinks. Because in the Red Strings Club, you're not just serving a drink, you're serving food for the soul. You have to make it hit a certain bar and a certain requirement to get in touch with your customers' emotions, which you will then ruthlessly exploit as much as humanly possible to get as much information out of them as you possibly can. And while that might not sound like the best thing, it is so much fun. It's so good. It feels like the best moments of the original Fallout story. When you're sitting on the edge of your chair, it's always like something like that going on. There's always some element that changes it that makes it more interesting. And that's not something a lot of games do, especially not with the story. Oftentimes, especially if you play bigger games like I tend to do as well, you will realize that a lot of the options that they give you are just the same thing, just set in a nice way or a not nice way. And especially Fallout 4 is really bad with that. The Red String Club takes that concept and actually adds uniqueness to it, and that's really awesome. I am so happy to see that. But I think I need to really talk about the mixing, because the mixing, at least for me, was at times a little bit of an issue, and that's mainly because in comparison to Coffee Talks, where you just click on the different ingredients you want to combine, the Red String Club does not that. You need to manually pour it and then shake the glass shake the shaker when you put it in your shaker so you can hit it more precisely and so on. And that can be a little bit of a pain in the ass from time to time. But honestly, it's not that bad, and I think most people will be able to get over that really quickly. However, I could see it being an issue for some people. I know I had a little bit of issues with hitting the specific things, because you do have to be specific with what you're making. And honestly, that's fine. It's fine. It's a short game. You can replay this in 4 hours. I think I spent 3.5. And to add to that, I think one of the most interesting parts is how you can manipulate the circle that sort of represents the emotion you want to go for. Because you see, if you want to, you can get this item that essentially resets the memory of the person you are talking to. So you can go back and recontextualize the entire thing and get more answers and more stuff, And that's really nice. It's a cool system. And I wanna talk a little bit more about the music, because I really do want to show you a little bit of it, and that's what we're gonna do now. I'm just gonna show you 30 seconds of a soundtrack from the game that I absolutely adore, and I'll let you, I want to hear your thoughts in the comments below, and then I'll go back to talk a little bit about it myself as well. So, what did you think? I personally love it. I think it's such a fitting melody that almost has some lo-fi vibes, but not quite. But definitely something I could see myself listening to in a bar in 17 years from now, when I'm, at a bar in a cyberpunk city, I guess. No, but for real, it's a really, really nice soundtrack that I absolutely adore. And again, I am genuinely interested in what you think. Please do let me know in the comments. But it's time to talk about the entire picture of this thing. Because the Red String Club, while I again don't want to discuss the story, we've discussed the art, we've discussed the music, it's time to sort of talk about how they all come together. And while that is gonna be hard without really talking about the story, because again, I don't want to spoil anything when it comes to it, I think it's a pretty good story. Needless to say, I actually think it's one of the best. And the way everything comes together, because this is an anti-corporate game, I mean, it can be anyway, depending on how you see things and how you answer. Like most cyberpunk stories tend to be. And this game is no different when it comes to that, and honestly, that's pretty good. And when it comes to the entire picture, what ends up happening is you get engrossed in this story, and it's so good, and then the soundtrack kicks in, and it just enhances it. Because that's the power of really, really good game design. When you have visuals that perfectly match the story and the setting, and on top of that perfectly matches the entire music, you have a masterpiece on your hand, my friend. And the Red String Clubs does that. And while the theming of anti-corporation and a little bit more human society and honestly what it means to be human are represented within the game, and they are extremely prevalent, they are only enhanced by all of this other stuff. Because if it wouldn't have been for the great music and the great audio design, because you can hear the raindrops and all of that hitting the windows, I love it. It's so good. And it has a genuinely interesting starting screen where you see, and I don't consider that a spoiler because it's literally as you boot up the game. It is before you even start the game. You see a character falling, and then you get to know him, and you literally go backwards from there, how he got into that position. And honestly, it's so interesting. Again, it's a high recommend for me, regardless of price. This is honestly really worth it. Because the thing is, like, some games, this is one of those you can replay. Like, there are games you can replay, and the Red Strings Club is one of them. And I think that adds a lot of value to your purchase, because it is interesting enough to go through multiple times. And that's really all there is to it. And that's really all there is to it for me. And like, one more thing I do want to mention is the fact that the reason why it's like this interesting to me is that I love sci-fi, I love cyberpunk, and all of this adds up to it. And honestly, that's about it for me on the Red Strings Club. I hope you enjoyed the video. I'm not gonna have a rant segment at the end this time, so have a very nice evening, have a nice night, and I hope you enjoyed your time here. If you want to, you can leave a like or subscribe. If you don't, that's okay. I'm honestly just happy you got to spend some time with me here today. Thank you, and have a good night.